Recording.
Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. For this particular series, I am joined by my wonderful co-host, that darn Kitty.
Dorkus and I are both going into the story completely new with almost no knowledge of the story or world.
Each segment, we intend to cover what happens in each new chapter and discuss our experience along the way.
Hold on to your butts, because this is Ascension Unleashed, a blind read-through, and today we will be covering Chapter 20.
Chapter 20. Okay, so this was a chapter.
Quite.
Of all the chapters out there, this was definitely among them.
Mm-hmm.
Please give me your opinion before I share mine.
Okay, I see where Vin's going with this. I see her insecurity. That's what my main takeaway was about Vin and what she's going through, what she's feeling. But it's not correct. That doesn't make it correct. Just because I can understand you're crazy doesn't mean it's not right. Like it's not crazy. So yeah, Vin is, she's gearing it. Look, we're gearing up for this romantic rivalry, so it makes sense that she's now getting more insecure, whatever. And then that's juxtaposed with Ellen's complete conviction that he loves her. So,
yeah, one of the notes that I sent to Kitty this week, and it was all in caps, was Vin, don't you dare dump Ellen.
She could try. I think that she might try, but the thing is, she's got to. If she doesn't explain what her reasoning is, then Ellen might think that, oh, she just doesn't love me or whatever. Yeah, then just don't, okay? Just don't.
Yeah.
But I feel like she will.
Yeah. And for clarity, yeah, a lot of her thoughts this chapter felt like she's trying to convince herself to do that. It's like in the very early stages of it. And part of it is, I think, more motivated by her interest in Zane. And there is that depression element in it. But I think if Zane weren't there, she would just be depressed and not necessarily thinking about potentially leaving Ellen under the guise of doing him a favor. No, this is Zane motivated.
But I do think she's not aware of it.
I agree with that.
Yeah, which helps me not hate her that much. But at the same time, yeah, no, don't do it. Stupid Vin.
Stupid Vin.
Yeah, she's having just insecurities and then breaking up with someone as a favor for them. Like there's that song called "I Want You to Be Happier." That song makes me angry. I'm like, no, don't come and do that. No, don't make it about me, honey. No, it's not about me being happier. Okay, it's you. You just don't want to be with me. Okay.
Yeah.
So, anyway, relax.
So I had a really interesting week with this chapter.
Okay.
I read it right after we recorded 19. Like, we got out of the StreamYard, and then I read the chapter. And 2 or 3 days later, I literally could not remember a single thing that happened in the chapter. Which was really interesting. And ultimately, I think there was a reason for it. And I will explain it.
Okay.
I will start by saying I really liked the Vin work. For everything we've said and all of the emotions it has put me through, I thought the Vin writing was very good. But this is the first chapter in this book that I really did not like, that I thought was poorly written.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And again, to clarify, I'm not referring to the Vin stuff. And to a lesser degree, I'm not referring to the Ellen Tindwell stuff. But I am very much referring to the Ellen crew stuff that I think comprised of the first, half of the chapter, 3/4 of it. One of the criticisms that I had, or two of the criticisms that I had with Mistborn, or the frequent things that I brought up with the first Mistborn book was that Brandon Sanderson had a tendency to repeat himself over things that I feel he had already effectively communicated and is known by the audience. We don't need to hear 20 times throughout the book that obligators are the enforcers of the Lord Ruler's government type thing. It was very much that in this chapter. It is all stuff we have heard almost verbatim in previous chapters that we know is what is going to happen, what they are trying to do. And add on top of that, it prevents Sanderson from, I think, digging even deeper into the characters and into the world because he is spending so much time, his economy of words, reiterating what we already know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can understand. Like, I didn't feel like I didn't like the chapter, so I don't have that. But now that what you're talking about, what it could have been, yeah, and the fact that he was spending time on one thing when he could have spent time on another, I think that's a valid criticism.
One of the instances of that in the chapter is reestablishing that Elend needs to be playing a part, and it's so important that he convince Straff that he's on Straff's side. We already know this. Why not use this time to perhaps have Doxson and Breeze and Ham run him through a few scenarios? Okay, Elend, if Straff says this, what do you say? If Straff does this, what do you say? Kind of a thing. And that could dig us deeper into some of the elements and grant more insight into the Straff-Elend relationship, but instead we just get the repetition of things we've heard in previous chapters. And respectfully, I'm still enjoying this book tremendously, but this bothered me.
I think it's when you go chapter by chapter like this, and you do get to critique every single one instead of just the story as a whole. There will be moments like that. That doesn't mean the whole story collapses. It's not a chat. And I would be interested if we could find a book that had just a chapter that broke it, that broke the whole book. But I see what you're saying. And I'm also just thinking, yeah, you know what? I am for being reminded of situations when things are complicated. Okay, I'm for being reminded through the book. But verbatim, not really interested. You know what you can do? Like you've said, those scenarios and things like that, those serve as reminders, because you know, oh, that's what the aim is. I don't need them to actually say that, but having them work on the plan that has been already exposed to us, that reminds you, that serves as a reminder. It does not. Yeah. When you say the word verbatim, it does not. We don't need verbatim. Sorry. No.
Right.
It kind of gets, that's very YA, but I guess that's kind of what Mistborn was supposed to be. So
yeah. Fair. And again, I liked the Vin insight in this chapter. I thought that was very well done. And
as usual.
I liked the end with Elend and Tindwyl talking about Vin. And that character work was well done. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, shall we get into it?
Yeah.
It wasn't until a few years later that I began to notice the signs. I knew the prophecies. I am a Terrace Worldbringer, after all. And yet, not all of us are religious men. Some, such as myself, were more interested in other topics. However, during my time with Alendi, I could not help but become more interested in the anticipation. He seemed to fit the signs so well.
Right. A Terrace Worldbringer, I suppose, is what Keepers used... No. I was going to say what Keepers used to be, but the Keepers are just so rare. That's... What am I trying to say here? Help me.
There was an organization, a large one?
Yeah, of Worldbringers that kept... I suppose that they're scholars, it seems to me. And now look what they've had to become. They had to become keepers who are running around hiding, staying in hiding, essentially. But
yes.
yeah. And then again, that makes me wonder: does Quan have Ferrochemy? I suppose it doesn't. No, because he's a terraceman.
He could. It is entirely possible. I haven't seen anything to suggest he doesn't, but I also haven't seen anything to suggest that he does.
Mm.
Then again, if Alendi's first exposure to feruchemy was after he hired Rashek and the Pac-Men, and if we are correct in our presumption that that happened after Quan did whatever it was that he did that separated him from Alendi,
Yes.
then it might be that he isn't.
No, you're right. Absolutely. You're right. It makes sense. Also, one more thing, he says he's not religious. He's interested in other topics. We don't know what the other topics are, I suppose. But he, because of Alendi, he started becoming more interested in the prophecies and things like that because you could see them happening in front of him.
Right. And it's noteworthy, philosopher, I don't think, is a religious term, right?
No.
So when I think of the Terrace philosophers, there doesn't necessarily need to be a religious connotation to those philosophers. I think where the religion comes in my mind as it pertains to them is prophecy, which does feel a bit religious, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and he's put them together, these concepts, himself. Yet not all of us are religious men, and so he speaks about the prophecies, and then he says, and yet not all of us are religious men. So he also considers prophecy part of religion. I mean, something like the anticipation is like, I mean, literally in Catholicism, there's a certain line in anticipation for the return of Christ or something like that. So there's a kind of link there where it's like the anticipation, capital A, is part of something. It feels like you would have to do certain preparations, whatever. You believe in that, I think. And that's a religious fact.
Right. Interesting.
And hey, he did seem to fit the signs. Great, Quan. Can you tell us what the signs were? Come on.
Please.
Tell us the prophecies, okay? So we can at least imagine. Like we got the summer hill or something like that, but I mean, come on, we need more. As usual, epigraphs. Gosh.
This is going to be dangerous, Your Majesty, Doxson said. It's our only option, Ellen said. He stood behind his table stacked with books as usual. He was lit by the study's window, and its colors fell upon the back of his white uniform, dyeing it a brilliant maroon.
He certainly does look more commanding in that outfit,
Vin thought, sitting in Ellen's plush reading chair, Orasur resting patiently on the floor beside her. Oh, that reminds me, I had another, it's Orasur, isn't it, thought. Because I remembered we had a whole discussion about whether or not Zane, the Watcher, was able to overhear Orasur shout out, Mistress, are you okay, Mistress?
Yes.
I think it's Orasur.
Oh, but okay, so if it's Orasur, and so because you're using that discussion of the fact that he didn't like react to the dog having cried out because he knows. Okay, I can see that. That is a point. I would believe it if it was confirmed. But again, I'm just thinking about your spy and the written notes. But again, we do have the thing that like he makes a dog hand. So like, it makes sense for him. He would be able to. I don't see why if you can open a freaking pocket of his flesh and put some stuff in there and close it up again, moving the bones around to make fingers is not that far-fetched.
True. She still wasn't sure what to think of the changes in Elland. She knew the alterations were mostly visual. New clothing, new haircut, but other things about him seemed to be changing as well. He stood up straighter when he spoke, and was more authoritative. He was even training in the sword and the cane. Vin glanced at Tindwell. The matronly terrace woman sat in a stiff chair at the back of the room, watching the proceedings. She had a perfect posture and was ladylike in her colorful skirt and blouse. She didn't sit with her legs folded beneath her, as Vin currently did, and she never wore trousers.
What is it about her? I've spent a year trying to get Ellen to practice his swordsmanship. Tyndall's been here less than a month, and she already has him sparring.
So, I am 1000% Team Vin on this one. I would be annoyed too. I've
Yeah.
been trying to get you to do this thing, and then she comes along and you do it? The hell, man?
Yeah. Well, her reasoning, was not that different to mine. So yeah, I would also be up in arms about it. But hey, at least it's happening. Just a note on the Vin work that is happening here already. She's got comparisons with other women happening because she's like, look at me, I fold my legs underneath, I'm not good. So she does start questioning about herself. And also, one thing we didn't front load much is that there is change in Elend, and that's probably going to be quite scary for someone like Finn. Any change in a person, things like that, it's not going to make her feel secure. It's not going to make anyone feel secure, but for her, she's already heavily insecure. So stop saying secure. Okay.
Yes. Why did Vin feel bitter? Elend wouldn't change that much, would he? She tried to quiet the little piece of her that worried about this new, confident, well-dressed warrior of a king, worried that he would turn out to be different from the man she loved. Okay.
Here we go.
Sure, I'm still personally struggling to think of Elend as a warrior, though. He's getting better.
Yeah,
I don't think he needs to. Yeah, I don't think he will ever truly be a warrior, though.
Yeah, he'll just be less bad. Okay.
Yeah.
He's not going to be a ham suddenly. And another thing is your partner. Okay. When you are with your partner is going to change, especially if you're going to be with them for a very long time, because that's what happens with humans. Yes, humans do change, but not that drastically. They don't. They add traits. Okay, they level up, but their base characteristics stick. Those base characteristics usually are stuck around. So yes, changing your partner is scary, but it is not. It doesn't necessarily mean now they're not the person I love. It's like, well, the person you love is never going to stay the same the whole time. That's a naive view, and of course, I understand her being naive.
Yeah, people change, and
they develop. Not like change. It changes is a bit more, maybe a bit scary, because it's like they change into something else. Develop. They develop. The characters develop.
What if he stopped needing her? And then that's the insecurity right there, like the thesis statement for this chapter for her, right?
Yeah, what if he stops needing me? That because there's only value in her, helping him. It's not just her being there, just her, literally just her existence being enough for him. She has to be useful, which goes back to like the first few chapters we got with Vin, when she was to come to terms with being part of Calcia's crew. It's like, oh, if I'm no longer useful to them, then it's not going to work. So she has this very deeply ingrained in her that she's not useful to someone, then she might as well not be in their lives.
Right. She pulled down into the chair a bit farther as Elend continued to speak with Ham, Docks, Clubs, and Breeze. I worry that if you enter the enemy camp, you'll never come out. Only if I fail. If I follow the plan, convince my father that we're his allies, he'll let me return. I didn't spend a lot of time politicking in the court when I was younger. One thing I did learn to do was manipulate my father. I know Straff Venture, and I know that I can beat him. Besides, he doesn't want me dead. Can we be sure of that? Ham asked, rubbing his chin. Yes. After all, Straff hasn't sent assassins after me while Set has. It makes sense. What better person for Straff to leave in control of Luthadel than his own son? At that, I was like, ho, 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 you have no clue that he's going to do exactly that, Elend.
Wrong son, though.
But then I'm like, well, actually, Straff is kind of scared of Zane. So maybe he would prefer Elend in charge if he knows he can manipulate Elend more.
Yeah, but why would he need to leave him in charge? Like, that's exact. I would feel like Straff would just take over Luthadel. Why does he need to?
Yeah, Straff should stay in Luthadel and send Zane and Elend back to the countryside.
Yeah, he doesn't find them both like while he's he's afraid of Zane, he also knows that thinks that Ellen is incompetent. So I don't think he would trust Ellen to do things for him.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, I understand that things have changed. So yes, I understand what he's saying. He would Straff would have sent assassins if he wanted him dead. I understand that, but for the time being, that makes it okay. But the reason that I went when I first heard that is like Straff does not care if Ellen lives or dies. Okay,
He actively tried to kill him in the last book.
Exactly, and at that point it made sense for him because everything was secure, and it was just part of his politicking and his machinations going on in Lutherdale, regardless of the Lord Ruler. Now he needs, I suppose, he just needs to get into Lutherdale. I don't think he needs Ellen after that at all.
I agree completely.
And all of this discussion and speculation could be done by the crew members. I don't see how we don't, like, this is where I'm noticing your critique of it, where it's just like we are just playing the same script.
Yeah, this is sort of the start of that. Mm-hmm. There's a bit more. I think we'll call it out as it comes.
And there's a hint there, like you said, they could have spoken about certain situations that Straff might, or things that Straff might do that they could go through. And he says, I know Straff Venture and I know how to manipulate my father. Like, that would be a great opportunity for them to say, okay, cool, then let's run through some scenarios. There it is.
Besides, he doesn't want me dead. Can we be sure of that? Yes. After all, Straff hasn't sent assassins after me while Set has. It makes sense. What better person for Straff to leave in control of Lutherdale than his own son? He thinks I'm a fool he can control. He'll assume that he can make me give him Lutherdale. If I convince him I'm no threat, I should be able to get him to attack Set. He does have a point. Yes, but what's to keep Straff from simply taking you hostage and forcing his way into Lutherdale? He'll still have Set to deal with. He doesn't want to expose himself to attack from behind. So, there's, like, it's not totally verbatim, but we have already covered the topic of they're going to play both sides. We have already covered the psychology behind manipulating both sides.
Mm-hmm. You know what? Your version actually is less verbatim than mine, if you know what I'm saying. Because your version has, he'll still have Set at his back, and then that he doesn't want to expose himself. What I have is, if he fights us, he'll lose men, a lot of men, and expose himself to attack from behind. So it's like, that's even worse. Like, it plays into this criticism even harder.
Yeah, and it's very direct dialogue. It's very much, this is what's going to happen if this happens.
It's not as intriguing. It's not as intriguing as the crew meetings of old.
Yeah, dialogue like that doesn't feel as character driven, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more exposition driven. Mm-hmm. Yes, but what's to keep Straff from simply taking you hostage and forcing his way into Lutherdale? He'll still have Set to deal with. He doesn't want to expose himself to attack from behind. But he'll have you, my dear man, Breeze said. He wouldn't have to attack Lutherdale. He could make us open the gates. You'll have orders to let me die first. And that's why I set up the assembly. It has the power to choose a new king. That's good to know. Mm-hmm. I'm curious if that's in case there's no heir, or regardless.
Yeah, I wonder how that works.
Yeah. But why? Why take this risk, Al? Let's wait a bit longer and see if we can get Straff to meet with you in a more neutral location. You have to listen to me, Ham. Siege or no siege, we can't just sit here. If we do, either we'll get starved out, or one of those armies will decide to break the siege and attack us, hoping to take our walls, then turn and immediately defend them against its enemies. They won't do that easily, but it could happen. It will happen if we don't play the kings against one another. We already know this.
Yes, it's actually hitting even harder now. It really is. I see exactly what you're saying. I'm like, oh, I suppose you can say that, listen, that these arguments, they've had them before, right?
Mhm.
Add that in, add that to this. If you're going to repeat yourself this way, make that, guys, I've told you this. I've said this. Not you have to listen to me. No, you say, as we have said, as per my previous email, like say that at least, and then maybe I'll be okay.
Right. And they were all more or less already on board with it the last time they had this discussion. And they were a little
Hmm.
bit apprehensive. They weren't entirely sure if he could do it. Really dig into that apprehension a bit more instead of just repeating what the plan is.
Mm. I guess we could say, like, as much as we're saying it's exposition based, driven, Ellen is showing weakness by having to have these conversations again.
Yeah.
So, but again, I still feel like if there was reference to having said this, that would be much more, have a lot more punch to it. That would make it feel a lot more character driven. This just feels like you're repeating yourself so that we remember what the plan is, rather than, like, yeah, let's get into the argument about, as you know, it doesn't matter. We don't have time to have this to find a neutral location. It just seems like a bad. Ellen is not arguing well here, so I am leaning into, oh, there is some character reason here for this to happen, but it's just not executed in a way for,
Well,
yeah, for it to
we
be plausible.
know Yeah, well, we know from the end of the chapter, this is in part done to show the crew treating Ellen still more as an
Mm-hmm.
equal than a king, because that's the
Yeah.
topic that gets brought up. But
Mm-hmm.
I think you can still delve deeper into the character work without the repetition of the plan quite as heavy
Absolutely.
handed.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I know that everybody's just like, yeah, okay, I'm sure if as soon as Dorcas says something, Kitty agrees. Yeah, well, it it really makes so much sense. Okay? And I wish you were wrong, but it's frustrating me. Every single line now is like hitting me like a freaking hammer. I'm like,
Sorry about
oh no, I love it.
To be clear, I like this book, and I liked Mistborn too. They are not perfect books by any means, but I still enjoy them.
Yeah. No, when you go into, like I said, when you go into this much detail, there's going to be nitpicking. And again, we're
Yeah.
going to say it doesn't ruin the book. It's what else? Why else would we have this conversation anyway? I think we're fine. I think everybody understands what we're doing here.
The room fell silent. The others slowly turned toward Clubs, who nodded. He agreed.
Good job, Ellen.
Someone has to meet with my father, and I need to be that person. Then I'll go persuade Set that I want to ally with him. When they finally attack one another, each thinking we're on their side, we'll withdraw instead and force them to fight it out. The winner won't have enough strength left to take the city from us. That
Oh,
is
stop.
that was the line where I crossed into dislike territory for this chapter.
Yeah, it's actually really bad. And you know what? It's worse in my version because he also goes, Straff thinks I'm a fool, so I can convince him that I'm no threat. Then I'll go and persuade Seth that I'm on his side. Like, it even repeats a line that it had on the previous page.
Hmm,
Okay?
interesting.
Yeah, like, no.
Ham and Breeze nodded their heads. Dachshund shook his. The plan is good in theory, but going into the enemy camp without any soldiers? That seems foolish. Now, see, I think this is to our advantage. My father believes strongly in control and domination. If I walk into his camp, I'll essentially be telling him that I agree he has authority over me. I'll seem weak, and he'll assume that he can take me whenever he wants. It's a risk, but if I don't do this, we die.
I think that is clever. I think it's true. You do need to make him. That is part of letting him see he's got control over you. I understand that it is a risk, but yeah, I think it's worth it.
It's
Um,
committing to the bit.
yeah, it's really committing to the bit.
The men eyed each other. Ellen stood up a little straighter and pulled his hands into fists at his sides. He always did that when he was nervous. I'm afraid that this isn't a discussion. I've made my decision.
They're not going to accept a declaration like that.
Vin thought. The crew were an independent lot, yet surprisingly, none of them objected. Dachshund finally nodded his head. All right, Your Majesty. You're going to need to walk a dangerous line with Straff to make him believe that he can count on your support, but also that he can betray us at his leisure. You'll have to make him want our strength of arms while at the same time dismissing your strength of will. We've covered this.
And we can do it in different ways. There's more discussion that we could have, different turns of phrase that we can actually even have. Just have a further discussion. It's not going any deeper. Ugh.
It's really not, and I'm finding it so frustrating because I want it to go deeper.
But
Anyway.
but then again, I'm also understanding that it could be seen as just part of Elend's weakness, that we don't have these kinds of conversations. We stay at the surface because he just.
I'm
going to
disagree with you.
I'm trying
to. Okay. Cope away. And you need to do so without him figuring out that you're playing both sides. Can you do it? Honestly, Elend? Elend nodded. I can do it, Ham. I've gotten much better at politics this last year. He said the words with confidence, though Vin noticed that he still had his fists clenched.
He'll have to learn not to do that.
You may perhaps understand politics, but this is scamming. Face it, my friend, you're dreadfully honest, always talking about how to defend the rights of Scar and the like. Now, see, you're being unfair. Honesty and good intentions are completely different. Why, I can be just as dishonest as... Why am I arguing this point? We admit what has to be done, and we know that I'm the one who has to do it. Docs, would you draft a letter to my father? Suggest that I would be happy to visit him. In fact... Elend glanced at Vin. Then he continued. In fact, tell him that I want to discuss the future of Luthadel, and because I want to introduce him to someone special. Nothing like bringing a girl home to meet the father. Especially when that girl happens to be the most dangerous Allomancer in the Central Dominance. You think he'll agree to letting her come? If he doesn't, there's no deal. Make sure he knows that. But I do think he'll agree. Straff has a habit of underestimating me, probably with good reason. I'll bet that sentiment extends to Vin as well. He'll assume she isn't as good as everyone says. I did like that line because, one, it's true, but also Vin likes to pretend to be... Demure is not the right word, but less impressive. Diminutive. Yeah, she likes to be less impressive than she actually is.
Yeah, she likes that tactic.
Exactly.
Straff has his own Mistborn. To protect it, it will only be fair for Elend to be able to bring me. And if I'm there, I can get him out should something go wrong.
That probably wouldn't make for a very dignified retreat, getting slung over Vin's shoulder and carried to safety. Better than dying, Elend said, obviously trying to act good-natured, but flushing slightly at the same time.
He loves me, but he's still a man. How many times have I hurt his pride by being Mistborn, while he is simply a normal person? A lesser man would never have fallen in love with me. But doesn't he deserve a woman that he feels he can protect? A woman who's more like a woman? Vin!
Well, Vin, the first part of that line about hurting his pride, that is what made me think Vin's gonna dump him.
Okay. That was the key element there.
Yeah, or at least that is the first brick in the wall of what I think will eventually be her leaving Elend for Zane at some point in this story. And it's about him. I don't want to be the cause of your hurt pride.
Yeah, exactly. It's not exactly the hurt only the hurt pride. It's the fact that he endures the hurt pride for her. He endures it, and she feels like, because she says a lesser man wouldn't have fallen for me. So she knows that he loves her in spite of her being more powerful than him. That's just because he's a good man. And oh, shame, poor Ellen. He should actually be a worse man, and he deserves someone that doesn't step on his pride.
Or she deserves a worse man.
Yes, exactly. She does. She deserves someone who's insane. And yeah,
Insane.
Insane. It makes more sense. I'm smiling at that, not at Vin's demise. Yeah, it's so typical that I see it. I understand. It's like, oh, he deserves better than me. It's frustrating for us on the outside because we're like, yeah. And again, I like that we are addressing the fact that he is still a man, and it does make him feel uncomfortable. I feel like that does not need to be ignored. I feel like addressing it is good, but
I agree.
that does not mean now dump him. That doesn't mean. It means look at Ellen. Look at him, confident in his masculinity.
Yeah. And I think, as I said at the beginning, this part of the chapter, this Vin stuff, is my favorite part of the chapter, and I think that is very well done.
Oh, it's really, as usual, it's really done well. My cope has not subsided, actually.
No.
Okay, but let's continue.
Vin pulled down in her chair again, seeking warmth within its plushness. It was Ellen's study chair where he read. Didn't he also deserve a woman who shared his interests? One who didn't find reading a chore? A woman with whom he could talk about his brilliant political theories?
Why am I thinking about our relationship so much lately? We don't belong in their world,
Zane had said.
We belong here in the mists. We don't belong with them.
There is something else I wanted to mention, Your Majesty. You should meet with the Assembly. They've been growing impatient to get your ear. Something about counterfeit coins being passed in Luthadel. I bet that'll be important.
Mm-hmm. Keep that in mind.
I don't have time for city business right now. The prime reason I set up the Assembly was so that they could deal with these kinds of issues. Go ahead and send them a message, telling them that I trust their judgment. Apologize for me, and explain that I'm seeing to the city's defense. I'll try to make the Assembly meeting next week. Dockson nodded, scribbling a note to himself. Though, that is something else to consider. By meeting with Straff, you'll give up your hold on the Assembly. This isn't an official parley. Merely an informal meeting. My resolution from before will still stand. I read that, and I had Dockson's reaction.
It doesn't make sense. It's cope.
Yeah. It's going to be a tough one to sell.
Mm-hmm.
In all honesty, Your Majesty, I highly doubt that they will see it that way. You know how angry they are to be left without recourse until you decide to hold the parley. I know, but the risk is worthwhile. We need to meet with Straff. Once that is done, I can return with, hopefully, good news for the Assembly. At that point, I can argue that the resolution hasn't been fulfilled. For now, the meeting goes forward.
More decisive indeed. He's changing.
She had to stop thinking about things like that. Instead, she focused on something else. The conversation turned to specific ways that Ellen could manipulate Straff, each of the crew members giving him tips on how to scam effectively.
We want to hear that!
Yes! Why did you skip over that part?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe there's an argument to be made that it's because that stuff is less interesting to Vin, but Vin already knows the other stuff, just like we do, so...
Yeah. No, I am in agreement. No, I am in agreement with you of the whole premise of it's just the repetition is just not good. If the cope reason is what was in mind, it was not executed well. It still needed to be executed the way you spoke about it. So my cope reason being that we need to show Elend is weak and repeating himself and, not actually getting deeper into the conversation. Without it actually being addressed that there is repetition, it wouldn't be lampshading or anything like that. Without that, I don't see the character drivenness of it. So
except we do need Elend to be a touch more confident in this chapter so that Vin can have the observations that he's confident. But you know what? We can show that confidence in Ellen's familiarity with Straff. And we could learn a bit more about that dynamic. We could make this whole chapter, or at least this whole part of the chapter, about how Elend knows Straff because of past experiences and what to expect of Straff in the meeting that he is setting up.
Yeah, the richness of that conversation would have been so much more preferable. Like, just thinking of, what Breeze was saying. Oh, you're too honest. It's like, oh, you still have to appear like the honest fool. So how will we do that? So I want to hear that conversation. No, but we don't get it. So yeah, criticism stands.
Or even more, have one of the characters be outright antagonistic to Elend. I don't think you can do this, instead of the questioning nature, and just get into those reasons. I don't think you can do this because of this, this, and this, and have him be like, I'm confident I can do it because I had this experience and I know that he likes this and this. Anyway.
Yeah, more decisive indeed. He's changing.
She had to stop thinking about things like that. Instead, she focused on something else. The conversation turned to specific ways that Elend could manipulate Straff, each of the crew members giving him tips on how to scam effectively. Vin found herself watching them, looking for discrepancies in their personalities, trying to decide if any of them might be the Kandra spy. Was Clubs being even quieter than normal? Was Spook's shift in language patterns due to growing maturity, or because the Kandra had difficulty mimicking his slang? Was Ham perhaps too jovial? He also seemed to focus less on his little philosophical puzzles than he once had. Was that because he was more serious now, or because the Kandra didn't know how to imitate him properly? It was no good. If she thought too much, she could spot apparent discrepancies in anyone. Yet at the same time, they all seemed like themselves. People were too complex to reduce to simple personality traits. Plus, the Kandra would be good, very good. He would have a lifetime of training in the art of imitating others, and he had probably been planning his insertion for a long time. It came down to allomancy then. With all of the activities surrounding the siege and her studies about the deepness, she hadn't had a chance to test her friends. As she thought about it, she admitted that the lack of time was a weak excuse. The truth was that she was distracting herself because the thought of one of the crew, one of her first group of friends, being a traitor was too upsetting.
Yeah, I was like, oh, Vin, no, it's not about them being a traitor. It's about them being dead. Vin.
Yes.
They aren't a traitor if they are the Kandra. They are dead.
Yes. I wish she would have that thought.
But I understand her. She would avoid that thought.
Also, it would be least disappointing for her if it ends up being Orasor.
Yeah, because she's not that into Orasor.
She never liked him.
Never liked him anyway. Okay.
Yep. But I bet Dagosor is beginning to like her.
Yeah, regardless of him being the imposter, probably.
Exactly. All of my previous thoughts about can a Kandra go rogue and being a dog allowing him to develop his own personality, I think that is all still able to be done, even though it might not necessarily be Orasor the Kandra specifically.
I'm with you on that.
She had to get over that. If there really were a spy in the group, that would be the end of them. If the enemy kings found out about the tricks Elend was planning. This in mind, she tentatively burned bronze. She immediately sensed an allomantic pulse from Breeze. Dear, incorrigible Breeze. He was so good at allomancy that even Vin couldn't detect his touch most of the time, but he was also compulsive about using his power. I don't mind that little bit of repetition quite as much, because we only got that once before in the group, I think, but it doesn't help that we're just coming off of pages of repetition. Anyway, I don't want to get bogged down in that more. I think we've made our point there.
Yeah, I think this is less egregious. Yeah.
Yeah. He wasn't currently using it on her. She closed her eyes, focusing. Once, long ago, Marsh had tried to train her in the fine art of using bronze to read allomantic pulses. She hadn't realized at the time quite how large a task he'd begun. An allomancer burning a metal gave off a drum-like beat that only someone burning bronze could sense. The rhythm of these pulses, how quickly the beats came, the way they sounded, told exactly what metal was being burned. It took practice, but Vin was getting better at reading the pulses.
Okay, so our lines obviously are different. Because mine goes, she focused, Breeze was burning brass, the internal mental pushing metal, and Vin focused harder. So I don't have any lines now.
Interesting. So for me, you think if I focus harder and then I continue to talk.
Okay. If I focus harder.
She could feel a pattern washing over her, a double dum-dum beat with each pulse. They felt oriented to her right. The pulses were washing against something else, something that was sucking them in. Elend. Breeze was focused on Elend. Not surprising, considering the current discussion. Breeze was always pushing on the people he interacted with. Okay, so how much of that did you have? Because I don't think I read anything that you just briefly read to me.
No, I had all of that.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Satisfied, Vin sat back, but then she hesitated.
Marsh implied there was much more to bronze than many people thought. I wonder.
I also want to point out here, Vin had determined not to check Elend, that she would trust him to not be the Kandra.
Yeah.
That she would not soothe him. Here we have Breeze soothing him, and here we have Vin seeing Breeze soothe him and him being affected.
Yeah, from the fact that he has been, like, she also perceives something basically receiving that, you know, like she's perceived, what is it called? She perceived the animantic waves being absorbed by him. Yeah, pulses being absorbed by him. So yeah, he is being affected.
Yeah, and she even realizes that he is seemingly more confident this chapter. So that all makes sense. So I don't think it's her breaching that trust that she had set up. It's just noteworthy that I think there's her answer.
Yeah, there's the answer, whether she realizes it or not.
Yeah, and she doesn't have this line of thought, so she doesn't necessarily notice it.
Well, she doesn't want. Yeah, I understand why she wouldn't want to, because then it's like, oh, I tested him.
Yeah, even though technically she's not.
She's
just testing someone else and then noticing. Anyway, she squeezed her eyes shut, ignoring the fact that any of the others who saw her would think her actions strange, and focused again on the allomantic pulses. She flared the bronze, concentrating so hard she felt she'd give herself a headache. There was a vibration to the pulses, but what that could mean, she wasn't certain.
Focus,
she told herself. The pulses stubbornly refused to yield any further information.
Fine, I'll cheat.
She turned off her tin. She almost always had it on a little bit, then reached inside and burned the 14th metal, Duralumin. The allomantic pulses became so loud, so powerful, she swore she could feel their vibrations shaking her apart. They pounded like beats from a massive drum set right beside her, but she got something from them.
Anxiety, nervousness, worry, insecurity, anxiety, nervousness, worry.
It was gone, her bronze expended in one massive flare of power. Vin opened her eyes. No one in the room was looking at her except Orasur. She felt drained. The headache she'd predicted before now came in full force, thudding inside her brain like the tiny brother of the drum she'd now banished. But she held to the information she'd gleaned. It hadn't come in words, but feelings, and her first fear was that Breeze was making these emotions appear. Anxiety, nervousness, worry. Then she immediately realized that since Breeze was a soother, if he focused on emotions, they would be the ones he was dampening, the one he was using his powers to soothe away. Good Vin, smart Vin.
Yeah, I hadn't come to that realization. I was like, whoa, what's going on? So I also had that fear. So I'm glad that we had that realization. Thank you.
She looked from him to Elend.
Why? He's making Elend more confident.
If Elend stood a little taller, it was because Breeze was quietly helping, soothing away anxiety and worry. And Breeze did this even as he argued and made his usual mocking comments. So here she is acknowledging that the soothing is in fact working on him. She just doesn't quite make the connection that means he's not the Kandra.
Yeah, she doesn't take the next step with that. You know what she's focused on? You could see her kind of cling to it. It's like, so he's not really that confident. It's not that he's really got more confidence and he's changed. It's Breeze. But
yes.
But then she also is focusing on what Breeze is doing, in that he is doing this while still being Breeze.
Yes. And I'm also going to point out that at this point on my initial read through, I was thinking, well, we already knew it wasn't Breeze. So,
Yeah.
okay.
But I like this because of what comes next.
Agreed.
Because it's actually it's called it for you when you were talking about what Breeze might have been up to in that other army and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So it's absolutely necessary.
Vin studied the plump man, ignoring her headache, feeling a newfound sense of admiration. She'd always wondered a little at Breeze's placement in the crew. To some extent, the other men were all idealists. Even Clubs, beneath his crotchety exterior, had always struck her as a solidly good man. Breeze was different. Manipulative, a little selfish. He seemed like he'd joined the crew for the challenge, not because he really wanted to help the Ska. But Kelsier had always claimed that he'd chosen his crew carefully, picking the men for their integrity, not just their skill. Perhaps Breeze wasn't an exception after all. Vin watched him pointing his cane at Ham as he said something flippant, yet on the inside, he was completely different.
You're a good man, Breeze. You just try your best to hide it.
And he also wasn't the imposter. She'd known that before, of course. Breeze hadn't been in the city when the Khandra had made the switch. Having a second confirmation lifted a tiny bit of her burden. Now if she could only eliminate some of the others.
Right, so I think that was okay, having just that tiny little repetition, that tiny little, yeah, I knew that, but it's given me something. It's given me double confirmation, which I also am very happy to have.
Yeah.
And then obviously the good man Breeze. Goodman Breeze.
Yeah. Goodman Breeze. Elend bade the crew farewell after the meeting. Doxson went to pen the requested letters, Ham to go over security, Clubs back to training the soldiers, and Breeze to try to placate the assembly regarding Elend's lack of attention. Vin shot him a glance, then eyed Tindwell. Suspicious of her still, eh? Elend thought with amusement. He nodded reassuringly, and Vin frowned, looking a little annoyed. He would have let her stay, but, well, facing Tindwell was embarrassing enough alone. That last line speaks a little bit to the thoughts of pride from the last segment.
Yeah, that really does. That does bring it along. Like, I don't need her to see this.
Yeah. Vin trailed out of the room, Wolfhound Khandra at her side. Looks like she's growing more attached to the creature, Elend thought with satisfaction. It was good to know that someone watched over her.
Oh, Brandon! No! If it is Orisha, he just slapped us with that. Like, come on.
She shut the door behind her, and Elend sighed, rubbing his shoulder. Several weeks of training with the sword and cane were taking a lot out of him, and his body was bruised. He tried to keep the pain from showing, or rather from letting Tindwell see him show the pain. At least I proved that I'm learning. She had to see that. Well?
You are an embarrassment.
So you like to say, Elend said, walking forward to begin piling up a stack of books. Tindwell said that he needed to let servants keep his study clean, something he'd always resisted. The clutter of books and papers felt right to him, and he certainly didn't want someone else moving them around. Yes! Well said, Elend. Or well thought, rather. Don't touch my stuff.
Don't touch my stuff. Like, look, I agree. My piles of things, yeah, just I know where stuff is. Like, my husband does not touch my desk, so I'm with him on that. But also, yes, we don't need anyone looking through your stuff. We don't need any spies. Thank you. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, even that added benefit. Oh, man. But no, I've been going through a move recently, and I've had to, as a result, move all of my things around and then move it around again. And I'm like, where did I put the thing that I just put down? Yeah, I'm with you on this, Elend. With her standing there looking at him, it was difficult not to feel self-conscious about the mess. He stacked another book on the pile. Surely you noticed how well I did. I got them to let me go into Straff's camp. I got them to let me go into Straff's camp. Okay, King.
Okay, King, go off. Like, look at you. Like, just the way that you put that together. I know it is. It's like, Elend, oh, honey. Okay, I'm going to try and not say this with a smile on my face because I know that Tindwell's not smiling. You are a king, Ellen Wincher.
Tindwell said, arms folded.
Nobody lets you do anything. The first change in attitude has to be your own. And you have to stop thinking that you need permission or agreement. I don't know what I'm doing with this voice anymore.
It's fine. Whatever
comes,
good for
it's a
you.
voice. Nobody lets you do anything. The first change in the attitude has to be your own. You have to stop thinking that you need permission or agreement from those who follow you.
A king should lead by consent of his citizens. I will not be another lord ruler.
A king should be strong. He accepts counsel, but only when he asks for it. He makes it clear that the final decision is not his counselors. You need better control over your advisors. If they don't respect you, then your enemies won't either, and the masses never vote.
Ham and the others respect me. Tindwell raised an eyebrow. They do.
What do they call you?
They're my friends. They use my name.
Or a close approximation of it. Right, L?
Ellen flushed, setting one final book on the stack. You'd have me force my friends to address me by my title?
Yes. Especially in public. You should be addressed as Your Majesty, or at least my Lord.
What about His Grace?
Yeah. That's awkward. I don't know how I would land up doing that. How do you change that? Like, oh, by the way, like in public, I can understand telling them that, but in private, making that, it's too far. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be an awkward conversation. I doubt Ham would deal with that well. He has some issues with authority. Okay, so first off, does he really? I never got that from Ham. I mean, besides the sleeveless thing, but I thought that was... I never really interpreted that as an authority issue. It's Moxon that you should worry about.
Mm-hmm. I think, I don't have Ham as having a problem with authority. It's more having a problem with niceties and, what do you call it? Decorum. That sort of thing. With manners. He doesn't like manners, okay?
Yep. He's just too casual for his own good.
He will get over them.
Tindwell said, wiping her finger along a bookcase. She didn't need to hold it up for Ellen to know there would be dust on it. What about you?
Me.
You call me Ellen Venture, not Your Majesty.
I am different.
Well, I don't see why you should be. You can call me Your Majesty from now on. Tindwell smiled slyly.
Very well, Your Majesty. You can unclench your fists now. You're going to have to work on that. A statement should not give visual cues of his nervousness.
Ellen glanced down, relaxing his hands. All right.
In addition, you still edge too much in your language. Makes you seem timid and hesitant.
I'm working on that.
Don't apologize unless you really mean it. And don't make excuses. You don't need them. A leader is often judged by how well he bears of responsibility. As king, everything that happens in your kingdom, regardless of who commits the act, is your fault. You are even responsible for unavoidable events, such as earthquakes or storms.
Or armies. Tindwell nodded.
Or armies. It is your responsibility to deal with these things. And if something goes wrong, it is your fault. You simply have to accept this.
Ellen nodded, picking up a book.
Now, let's talk about guilt.
Tindwell said, seating herself.
Stop cleaning. This isn't a job for a king.
Ellen sighed, setting the book down.
Guilt does not become a king. You have to stop feeling sorry for yourself.
You just told me everything that happens in the kingdom is my fault.
It is.
How can I not feel guilty then?
You have to feel confident that your actions are the best. You have to know that no matter how bad things get, they would be worse without you. When disaster occurs, you take responsibility, but you don't wallow or mope. You aren't allowed that luxury. Guilt is for lesser men. You simply need to do what is expected.
That was a good line.
The responsibility, which one is it?
I mean, the whole part.
Oh, the whole speech, yeah.
The whole speech, but no matter how bad things get, they would be worse without you part.
And you have to know that. I like that part. That part is that you have to know. So you must know that, take it in, and that's it. You don't question it. That's what she means. You have to know it. You can't go through guilt and have to convince yourself every single time. This period of time where you have to grieve and then remind yourself, no, actually things would be better with would be worse without me. You have to know that. Just keep knowing that. That's actually, I don't know if he can pull that off.
He needs an ego.
Yeah, he needs an ego. You simply need to do what is expected.
And that is?
To make everything better.
Great. And if I fail?
Then you accept responsibility and make everything better on the second try.
I mean, that's easy enough to say, Tindwyl, but when you're playing a high-stakes game, there are high-stakes consequences to failing.
Yeah, second try isn't a thing a lot of the time.
Someone will overthrow you, or assassinate you, or something.
Yeah, but I guess you got it. Either way, as much as you know that, you still need to keep going. It's not an if, it's when. So you've just got to have that confidence. Again, get an ego, Elend, which, might make Vin not like you much.
That's true. She does like his earnestness.
But then again, she is like enticed by Zane's ego and just confidence.
True.
Zane has just decided what the world is like. We ourselves have spoken about him just projecting onto everything. That's ego as well. It's just like, oh well, I decide what reality is. Anyway, I don't think it's possible for Elend. Good Elend.
Elend rolled his eyes. And what if I can't ever make things better? What if I'm really not the best man to be king?
Then you remove yourself from the position. Suicide is preferred. I love this so much. Stop smiling though. It's so funny. Then you remove yourself from the position. Suicide is the preferred method, assuming, of course, that you have an heir. A good king knows not to follow up the succession.
Of course. So you're saying I should simply kill myself.
Sorry.
A little bit more of that wit and banter.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of dark humor here going on.
Yeah, it is. I'm enjoying
considering the subject matter. Yeah, I'm enjoying it too.
Yeah, like, and I think she's not doing that. Well, we'll see with this next line. No, I'm telling you to have pride in yourself, Your Majesty.
That's not what it sounds like. Every day you tell me how poor a king I am, and how my people will suffer because of it. Tindwyl, I'm not the best man for this position. He got himself killed by the Lord Ruler.
So, okay, that's a lot we're going to unpack coming. Just about the dark humor of the suicide thing, I found it quite endearing. And I don't feel like Tindwyl is, dealing with a fragile person, like as if suggesting something like that would make Elend go and do it. She knows that he's going to take that as a ridiculous, that's not the solution. She's just putting it down in that way that to show, look, that's not your option, right? If you were so committed to being not the best man, then you would take it all the way to the extreme, wouldn't you? And you know that you're better than that. So I don't know, it just helps the way she said it as well. I'm telling you to take pride in yourself. So yeah, I love the way that interaction happened. So
I agree. And I'm really glad that he finally had this Kelsier line here.
Yes, he needed this.
Very much so. I think there's hopefully going to be a bit of a catharsis now that he has said that to Tindwyl specifically, since apparently saying it to Vin hasn't worked or got the proper response that he's looking for about it from her. Because this is the source of the insecurity more than anything in this book for him.
This comparison. And Vin's response, you're so right. Vin's response didn't really help him because it's just, oh, well, you're better than him. You're a good man or whatever. This is not the response. He needed something else. And I feel like Tindwyl gives it better.
Yeah.
That is enough. Believe it or not, Your Majesty, you are the best person for this position.
Elend snorted.
You are best because you hold the throne now. If there is anything worse than a mediocre king, it is chaos, which is what this kingdom would have if you hadn't taken the throne. The people on both sides, noblemen and Scar, accept you. They may not believe in you, but they accept you. Step down now, or even die accidentally, and there would be confusion, collapse, and destruction. Poorly trained or not, weak of character or not, mocked or not, you are all this country has. You are king, Alan Winter.
Interesting monologue. I like it. I like it
Mhm.
all. I wonder, A, if she would be saying that to literally anyone who was the king in front of her,
Mm.
Ellen, Ham, Dachshund, whoever, or if she actually believes it. Because I know from the start she was like, I don't know about this guy. He might have it in him, but I don't know. And I don't think we've had enough time and development and insight yet for her to actually come to respect him in that way quite yet. So I'm leaning more towards the A option.
I'm feeling like we haven't seen it, but she has come to know he is quite valuable. She's come to see certain characteristics that she likes about him. So I feel like she wouldn't say it in this many words even to someone else if they didn't fit her criteria. She would be trying to find a way for him to transfer power to someone else or something like that. So I feel like she does believe this a little bit, that because Nobleman and Scar both accept him, she does have this belief. That's what I'm feeling. And I feel like there has been enough time. We just haven't seen it. And this is just showing that something has changed. It's just she has spent enough time with him to want to support the things she's seen in him.
Interesting. I like it.
And look, as much as Vin's response was, "You're a good man, Ellen," or whatever, it's not the same as what Tynwell has said here. Tynwell is talking about what's good for the country, and also just where he is, the fact that he is the king.
Yeah.
So it's and yes, coming from her, it will be different. I know that hearing praise from your partner is like it falls on deaf ears a lot of the time, because it's just like, oh, you're so biased. You don't know. You don't know anything. You're so biased. It's like, well, actually, no, I know exactly how cool you are, but it's hard for somebody to accept that.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you're making me feel any better about myself, Tindwell.
It's
Ellen raised a hand. Yes, I know. It's not about how I feel.
You have no place for guilt. Accept that you're king. Accept that you can do nothing constructive to change that, and accept responsibility. Whatever you do, be confident. For if you weren't
Ellen
there,
did not.
sorry,
Wait, is there more?
there's no there's no Ellen. The Ellen nodded is after this. Whatever you do, be confident. For if you weren't here, there would be chaos. And then Ellen nodded. That's what it says.
Interesting. I don't quite have that.
What do you have?
Ellen nodded. Arrogance, Your Majesty. Successful leaders all share one common trait. And then it goes
That
on.
comes next. Whatever you do, be confident. For if you weren't here, there would be chaos.
Ellen nodded.
Arrogance, Your Majesty. Successful leaders all share one common trait. They believe that they can do a better job than the alternatives. Humility is fine when considering your responsibility and duty, but when it comes time to make a decision, you must not question yourself.
I'll try.
Good. Now, perhaps we can move on to another matter. Tell me, why haven't you married that young girl?
And I like this next part of the chapter.
Yeah, let's see, as much as we complained about the earlier bits of the chapter, this is very good stuff.
Yeah. Ellen frowned. Wasn't expecting that. That's a very personal question, Tindwell.
Good.
Ellen deepened his frown, but she sat expectantly, watching him with one of her unrelenting stares. I don't know. Vin isn't like other women. Tindwell raised an eyebrow, her voice softening slightly.
I think that the more women you come to know, Your Majesty, the more you'll find that statement applies to all of them.
Oh, sweet, silly, naive Tindwell. You have no idea. But I did actually like the line. Ellen nodded ruefully.
Either way, things are not well as they stand. I will not pry further into your relationship, But as we've discussed, appearances are very important to a king. It isn't appropriate for you to be seen as having a mistress. I realize that sort of thing was common for imperial nobility. The Scar, however, want to see something better in you. Perhaps because many noblemen were so frivolous with their sexual lives, the Scar have always prized monogamy. They wish desperately for you to respect their values.
I'll just have to be patient with us. I do want to marry Vin, but she won't have it.
Do you know why?
Ellen shook his head. She doesn't seem to make sense a lot of the time.
Perhaps she isn't right for a man in your position.
It's important to note, this conversation here makes me think that Tindwell never did have that conversation with Vin.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't seem to know her very well.
Yeah. Vin just doesn't like her. Yeah, we don't have any thoughts from Vin that remember a conversation. Yeah, I don't think she's had it. But that's also because of Vin, I think. Because Vin's just avoiding it.
Yeah, that's entirely probable. And it's possible that the reason it hasn't happened yet is because Tindwell wanted to have this conversation first so that she could maybe try to convince Vin. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense.
Yeah.
Perhaps she isn't right for a man in your position.
Ellen looked up sharply. What does that mean?
Perhaps you need someone a little more refined. I'm certain she is a fine bodyguard, but as a lady, she...
Stop. Vin is fine as she is. Tindwell smiled. What?
I've insulted you all afternoon, Your Majesty, and you barely grew sullen. I mentioned your misborn in a mildly disparaging way, and now you're ready to throw me out.
So?
So you do love her?
Of course. I don't understand her, but yes, I love her.
I apologize then, Your Majesty. I had to be certain.
Ellen frowned, relaxing in his chair slightly. So this was some kind of test then? You wanted to see how I would react to your words about Vin?
You will always be tested by those you meet, Your Majesty. You might as well grow accustomed to it.
But why do you care about my relationship with Vin?
Love is not easy for kings, Your Majesty,
Tindwell said in an uncharacteristically kind voice.
You will find that your affection for the girl can cause far more troubles than any other things we've discussed.
And that's a reason to give her up? Ellen asked stiffly.
No, I don't think so.
Ellen studied the stately terrace woman with her square features and stiff posture. That seems odd coming from you. What about kingly duty and appearances?
We must make allowances for the occasional exception.
Interesting, Ellen thought. He wouldn't have considered her the type to agree to any sort of exception. Perhaps she's a little deeper than I've assumed.
Now, how are your training sessions going?
Ellen rubbed his sore arm. All right, I suppose, but he was interrupted by a knock at the door. Captain Demieux entered a moment later. Your Majesty, a visitor has arrived from Lord Set's army. A messenger? Demieux looked a little embarrassed. Well, sort of. She says she's Lord Set's daughter, and she's come looking for praise. End chapter.
That was a great way to end the chapter with that little, hey, guess what's going to happen with this?
Yes.
And we had that moment of, Breeze is a good guy. So that like moment of realization. So it's a nice way to just tie a little bow at the end.
Yeah, I liked it. Nice little cliffhanger.
Mm.
And I also liked that introspection about Tindwell. She probably is a person that cares quite deeply.
I was going to ask you, does this... So you had earlier on that she wasn't sure about... She still isn't sure about Elend being the right guy for the job, so she might be just saying this to most people. What about this? Like supporting... Is it just part of her plan to support this guy in his relationship or whatever?
I don't think the two are mutually inclusive.
Yeah.
I think that there is a person beneath the stern librarian.
Mm-hmm. And I think she likes Elend.
I think she's getting there.
Yeah, so she does, and she sees that there is benefit. I think from her, she would see there's benefit for Vin being close to him. But then again, yeah, appearance-wise, but again, wait, hold on. Appearance-wise, it's very good for Vin to be his his partner. We've said over and over again that they need to be married so that the Scar can feel better. Because Vin is so not a noble woman. We need that optics, actually. That is you can't actually have him with noble woman.
Yeah, and it's not even about the Ska. It's about the fact that she's the one that beat the Lord Ruler.
Yeah, it's a power couple.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, it just works. The optics of it just works. So it makes sense for Tindwyl to yes, personally care about people being in love, but also on the political sort of practical level, also saying, okay, this is a good match. And he has to test it. She has to test his conviction for it before. I think you're right. Before she has a conversation with Vin, because why waste that effort? And also just so that he is ready for what comes with this, because Vin can be used against him, which does make me worry.
Yeah. Yeah. What happens when Straff proposes to her?
Oh, well, what happens when Zane proposes to her? Huh?
Oh, dear.
Right.
Don't you dare break up with Ellen, Finn.
Yeah. There's going to be some sort of breakup bit.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to. Right. So, yeah, all in all, not my favorite chapter, but there were some really wonderful moments in here.
Yeah, I would say that. The chapter itself actually isn't broken by those criticisms early on because of this powerful stuff at the end and the powerful Vin stuff. For me, it's not broken for me. So,
yeah, I agree. I think that's all we've got for today. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I never promote it, but there is a Discord link if you guys want to join the Discord in the channel description. We've got a fun little community over there, and I post memes sometimes. Yeah, and go subscribe to That Tongue Kite. And we'll see you next week. Okay, thanks, bye.
Bye.